A few days after Russ had the lad at home, I don't know, 2 or 3, I got a call from him, and I said, I don't want to talk to you. Now, Mr. Riggs, we've always been able to talk. Well, yeah. Well, he said, I'd like an appointment to come in, and we need to talk. So the appointment was made, and probably the same day. Certainly, I didn't put him off. And he came in, and I said, you know, we just can't have him back in school. Well, and he said, let's do the talking before we make big decisions. Such a reasonable man. He said, do you remember the first day that we met and I showed you around Forest Heights Lodge? Yes, of course. Definitely remember. Very impressed. Well, he said, do you remember when we went into an open space, kind of a garden area, and there was a little boy sitting, pounding his head against a padded post? Oh, yes, I remember that. I was horrified. Couldn't imagine you letting him do it. It looked like he might damage himself. Well, he said, what did I tell you that day? I said, you told me he was getting well. Well, he said he did get well. He's gotten well enough that he's been in school now for several years. And that boy is the boy that we're talking about. Let's call him Joe. And he said, Joe's, I guess, he said, having a relapse here. We've got some problems, obviously, but he said, we'll keep him at the home, and work with him. But he said, I don't think the problem's all with the boy here. What do you mean? Well, he said, would you admit that Mrs. Jones might not like boys real well? Well, I said, Mr. Frost asked me kind of the same question, and yeah, sure, I know she's been through a painful divorce. Well, he said, I've never met the boy's mother, but I think somehow this boy sees his mother in Mrs. Jones and sees something about the way they interact that reminds him a great deal of his mother, and he's reacting to his mother, really, and not to Mrs. Jones. I said, what I'd like to do is we'll take him and we'll work with him and we'll check him out pretty close to see if, if he's gone clear over the ridge again. We have to go way back and start all over. But he said, I suspicion that won't be necessary. But we'll keep him a week or 2. And if I think he's all right, I'd like to bring him back over here and that you'd let him go to classes. But not to Mrs. Jones. He said, can you, take him out of there and put him somewhere else? I said, oh, I'm sure we could do that. Well, he said, let's try that. Now, he said, let's think about the rest of his schedule. He said, are you familiar enough with his schedule to know who his teachers are? I said, yes. Well, he said, do you have him under any other, what you might call, aggressive female women that he might relate to in any way as he's related here to Mrs. Jones? No, I don't think so. He's with a woman or 2, but they're very warm, loving, motherly type of people. Not that the other lady isn't. I wasn't saying that at all. But they hadn't been through any of this kind of stress that Mrs. Jones had been through. So to make a long story short, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks later, he's back in class and never had any more trouble. I think he was probably an 8th grader at that time. But at any rate, he graduated from junior high, went up to the high school, and he'd only been there a year or 2. And they had declared him up at Forest Heights Lodge as completely healed and put him up to go to a real home. Be adopted. And Russ made it a point. I can't even remember if it was after I was away from Evergreen completely, but he got word to me that they'd had a Christmas card or 2 now from Joe, and that he was doing well in his new home and had graduated from high school with a solid record. Go figure. You never know what you're going to run into in this old world. And I'll tell you what, I'm proud to have known Russ Colborn. Wish I could have known his predecessor, Hank, and his wife that founded that good program. But it's an honor to have worked with people who can take damaged children and have a 90-some% success ratio in rehabilitating them where they can go on and have successful, happy lives.